to Required Listening, the weekly show for and by web students and teachers. I'm your host, Professor Zach Gordon, and today I'd like to welcome our guest, Aarron Walter, to the show. Aarron is lead user experience designer of Mail Chimp, a regular speaker at conferences like Event Apart, and author of the recent Designing for Emotion. However, today we're going to be talking with Aarron about his time working as lead on the Web Standards Project Interact curriculum. Before we jump into the show, a special thanks to our sponsor, Wistia, the amazing video hosting service and JavaScript API that we use to publish our show. All right, so starting off, Around a Brook. This is the section where I briefly talk about some of the news from my web education site, debrook.org. And the first thing is that the responsive design is now live, finally. It looks pretty good across all the devices, although I'll probably be tweaking the mobile experience and iPad experience a little bit more, but that's finally live, so that's great. The second little bit of news is that I will be now revisiting some of the curriculum. I posted up about 9 courses that are based on the Web Standards Interact curriculum, and they were pretty cut and dry. So now I'm teaching one of them online, and I'm going to work on just kind of revising and moving away from just links to W3 Schools and SitePoint and a bit more personal material. So that's good. And final bit of news, I've been experimenting more with video API testing. I'm kind of clicked to parts of the video, and I'm coming to a sad realization that YouTube is actually a little bit better at frame compression than Wistia. So whereas I can link to 2 minutes and 30 seconds on YouTube, I might only be able to link 2 minutes and 36 seconds on Wistia. So we'll see if we make the switch again. We love Wistia and great sponsors of the show, but running across some technical issues there. But we'll see where that goes. So that's news around DeBrook, and let's jump in now and talk about our guest. First of all, Aarron, thanks again for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
You've done so much in the web world. Maybe you could just give us a brief update of what did 2011 look like you for what you were doing on the web and related stuff there.
Well, I did a lot of speaking at conferences in 2011, and so I was around the United States and in Europe a bit too. And then I had a book that came out, Designing for Emotion, published by A Book Apart. So that was 2011 was sort of a big year for me, and that was the result of years, probably about 3 years of research.
Wow.
And then about a year of writing. So I did a lot of research about emotional design and my work at Mail Chimp. We were exploring some of those ideas, and then I was exploring and researching what other people around the web are doing with emotional design. And looked into a lot of the psychology foundation behind that. So that's what's in that book. It's 100 pages. It's a little book.
Yeah.
It's designed so you can read it on a flight from Boston to Chicago. So you can read it very quickly.
Nice. And it is a great book and great work again on that. That was a great job. Just a quick question: how did you have to discipline yourself or have a method set up for how you were writing? Oftentimes that could be a tricky thing to get done.
Yeah, it was a little tricky because my wife and I, our first child arrived in 2010 while I was started writing too. So I was learning to be a dad and not getting a whole lot of sleep and trying to write and research. So it took me a lot longer to write than I thought. But the best way to write a book is just to sit down and write. As silly as that sounds, but you just have to make time, and so that means nights and weekends. And I won't lie to you, writing a book, it's hard. It's really painful. But publishing is fantastic. It feels so good to get something out there, and then it's really satisfying now that it's been out for a few months, and to hear people on Twitter and meet people in person and hear that they're reading it and found it valuable and relevant to their work. So that's really satisfying. That's why I like making things and putting them out there, because it's a way to connect with other people.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. What does your plate look like for 2012? What's coming up this year for you?
More speaking, I'm working on a new talk that I'm going to be giving for an Event Apart, and at Future Insights in Las Vegas.
That's right,
part of
yeah.
the personified stuff. And I've got some other speaking stuff that's starting to line up overseas as well. And I just finished a chapter for the next Smashing book that's coming out. It's about redesign. And so the chapter I wrote is about personality and redesign and how to use, use some psychology and emotional design and create a personality when you're redesigning a website, and how that can translate into bottom line and create a better connection with your audience. So that comes out probably like April. The book is now available for pre-sale, and I've got to say, there are a bunch of really great authors like I know Elliot J. Stotts,
Yeah.
Andy Clark, and various Denise Jacobs, lots of other really great smart folks, friends too. And then Virla Peters did the design of the book, and it's just it's a really beautiful book. So it's full color, and it's the printing is like, that thing is heavy.
That's awesome. I actually just saw in one of their newsletters that went out a notice about this book. You could pre-order, and they've really evolved those Smashing books. From the first one of just publishing kind of blog posts to now really planning it and designing. I'm excited to see how that looks. That's great.
Yeah.
Maybe we could talk a little bit then about your personal background. We're going to get into the Web Standards Interact curriculum project and all of that, but just in terms of you as a web educator, a lot of people know you from Mail Chimp and speaking at events, but maybe don't know that you've actually had some experience in the education world. And I was hoping maybe you could just talk a little bit about your own education, how you got into it, and then what your thoughts on it today are, if you see it something that you'd go back to later on at some point.
Well, my background is in painting. I went to I got a bachelor's in painting from the University of Iowa, and then I went to Philadelphia to get a master's in painting from the Tyler School of Art, which is part of Temple. It's a great school, and while I was there, the web was starting to really pick up steam, and I'd done some stuff with computers, and as a kid, I remember encountering the internet for the first time in the 80s with like an Atari dial-up modem where you put the phone on the modem and play this game with some guy in Denver, and which was weird to me. It was like I'm playing a game with my friend and this dude that's in Denver. It was mind-boggling. And did some programming on an Apple II in junior high, but I really didn't do a whole lot with computers or the web. The first time I saw the web when I was in undergrad, it was the early 90s, and a friend of mine showed me the web, and I was like, I don't get it. We went into the computer lab, and what are all these people doing? It just seemed weird to me. But that same friend that showed me the web, he moved to Philadelphia with me. We were roommates, and I was making paintings, and I just couldn't make the ideas fast enough. So I took a class in Photoshop, and I started to work through image concepts with Photoshop. And I found that those were more interesting than my paintings. And
interesting.
So I then started doing some CD-ROMs, and I wanted to learn HTML and try to put this stuff online and make these images interactive. So my friend Tony, he taught me HTML, and I was really curious about it. And so I finished graduate school knowing HTML by accident, knowing Photoshop. I learned After Effects and Director. And then at that point, I got out with 2 degrees in painting, and what do you do with 2 degrees in painting to teach painting? Maybe you go into the art world. That's really competitive. And so I ended up getting a job during the .com boom at a small agency, and because I had made these super wacky CD-ROMs that weren't graphic design based, they were just sort of these creative experimentations that were non-linear, kind of more like stories, abstract stories. And I got a job at a web shop, and I was making CD-ROMs there. We got to work for clients like David Bowie and Barnes & Noble.
Oh, cool.
If you remember that band Hanson,
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
they were a client of ours, and they called the office all the time.
You know, they actually just came out with a beer.
Oh, really?
Yep. Yep.
They're really nice kids. I really liked them. But I learned a lot, you know, at that shop, how to run a business and how not to run a business, how to talk to clients. I learned JavaScript. I started to learn CSS, and you know, so you know, long story short, I came from this creative painting background where I'm thinking in metaphor and thinking laterally and looking at the world and events and stuff. And then that brought me into the web where I don't paint anymore, and people, you know, when they hear that, they're like heartbroken for me. Oh, don't you miss it? And I'm like, no, I can't change the world with painting. I can change the world with the web.
Yeah.
But I can use all of that creative thinking that I learned in school and, you know, apply that there. So the education part was, as I got that job at this web shop in Philadelphia, I also started teaching graduate students, some friends, actually, you know, friends and peers of mine. I got a job teaching adjunct at Temple University, teaching sculptors and painters and fiber artists and ceramicists how to take their studio art into the digital world. And so we're making weird interactive CD-ROMs with After Effects and Director and Lingo, and you know, learning some basic programming. And so I made these core classes that were the foundation, and they're at Tyler School of Art for digital media.
Gotcha.
I moved away from Philadelphia. I moved to Athens, Georgia, where I live now, and I ended up getting a job at the Art Institute of Atlanta, where I taught for about 8 years. I taught interface design, I taught usability, I taught nonlinear narrative, history of communication media, foundation HTML and CSS classes, just, you know, the gamut of digital media concepts. Wow. And I taught at the University of Georgia, so I kind of just stumbled into teaching, but I found that I really liked it. I've you know, that I could be patient with people and that I could be passionate, and those two things together, you know, I have learned a lot from my students.
Yeah.
And the one thing I love about teaching is that I feel like teachers get a bad rap. You know, there's that stupid phrase that, you know, those that can't teach.
Yep.
I think that's just baloney, because if you're going to teach, you have to know your craft.
Yeah.
Inside and out in order to explain it. It's one thing to be able to do it yourself, and it's another thing to be able to share that and have a mastery of that concept, to share that with others. So I feel like any success that I've had in the web industry is all from, you know, the decade of teaching experience that I had.
Wow. Yeah, that's so true. I found, you know, my own skills have just increased so much having to teach it, whereas, you know, doing it is not the same level of mastery. That's an amazing. I actually didn't know that you had such a broad range of teaching different things. At what point did that begin to get phased out, or is teaching still? Are you still adjuncting, or do you see yourself, you know, maybe going back to it at some point?
I don't teach right now. I don't teach at a school, but writing and speaking sort of fills that gap for me.
Yeah.
So I do a lot of writing, and I do a lot of speaking, and I find that I can actually reach more people. I don't get to go as in depth, where, you know, when you're a teacher, you get to spend literally years with the same people, and you see them go through this transformation, and then you see them go out into the world and get a great job, and come back and go, man, you know, you helped me find my way and, you know, find this career path, and that's so satisfying, so great. But right now, like, I could go give a talk at a conference and I can talk to 500 people or more, and I do, you know, let's say anywhere from 12 to 15 conferences a year.
Wow.
That's a lot of people. And then you write a book, and, you know, that sells to thousands of people. You can reach a lot of people that way. So I've learned a lot from teaching, and I'm trying to bring that into what I do now in writing and speaking. but it was 2008 where I made the transition, and I was teaching this class about findability, and I found that I couldn't find a good textbook that covered, it's not just about SEO stuff, but I wanted to talk about like micro formats, and I wanted to talk about markup and web standards and all these different pieces coming together, social media stuff, which was kind of new at the time, and how all of that helps you connect with your audience. And so I couldn't find the right book. I was like, I bet I could write a book, or I could at least give it a shot. And it's at South by Southwest in 2007. It's the first year I went, and I just went to the Peach Pit booth because I really thought that new writers would be the right fit for, if I could publish with anyone, I really wanted to publish with them.
Yeah, they're great.
And I met this guy, Michael Nolan, who was their senior acquisitions editor. He's the guy that was the acquisitions editor for Jeffrey Zeldman's book, that changed the industry. So designing with web standards, and I just happened to catch him, and I talked to him about my idea, and he's like, "Well, why don't you send me a little proposal?" And they, gave me a book deal. So that one moment in my life where I had the courage to walk up and talk to him about an idea, that pretty much changed, all of my life, really, in the past 5 years.
Wow, that's awesome. And the book that came out of that, Building Findable Websites, is that the one?
Yeah, that's my first book.
Wow, awesome, man. That's a great story. I've definitely had experiences teaching classes that cover a range of web topics that don't have a good book, and I've a few times tried to start, but it never got beyond that, just because it really, like you said, it takes effort, it takes time, and it takes just doing it. But that's awesome, man. Let's go ahead and let's move into the topic for today, which is the Web Standards Project Education Task Force Interact Curriculum. And maybe just to start, if you could give us a little bit of history, as you know it, of the Web Standards Project and their Education Task Force.
So I don't know the entire background of the Education Task Force. I can tell you that it's been around for a number of years, and I joined in 2007, and in 2007, it seemed like there were a lot of people that were just seeing this gap of what's being taught in colleges and universities around the world and what was happening in the industry. And people in the industry were seeing that it's really hard to hire hire good people because they come out of school and just didn't know the right things to be able to perform well and do their job well. And so a lot of people started their own education initiatives, and I met some folks at South by Southwest, that same one that I just mentioned in 2007. I met Chris Mills at a bowling alley, which was great, and I met Glenda Sims, who was so instrumental and active in the Web Standards Project at the time, and she is now co-lead of WASP as well.
That's right.
With Aaron Gustafson and Derek Featherstone. She just got so much energy and passion. And, she definitely believes a lot in web education as well. So it was that year that I met Leslie Jensen Edmond as well. She teaches at the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. So there are just a lot of us that we met, and we were having the same thoughts of, man, I wish there were a curriculum that we could put together that had the right skills, that teaches the right skills that people need, give people a solid foundation so they can go out and get a career, and then that would make our industry more sustainable.
Yeah.
Make it easier to hire people. And so we started to get critical mass of folks, and that's when a bunch of us, we joined the Education Task Force that year, and we started Interact to create this curriculum. And I think it's up to 21 courses is what it is now, and it's a lot of content.
Yeah, it is.
All centered around these core competencies of what people need to learn in order to succeed. You've got to learn these concepts to pass the class, and then you go on to the next class. So it's organized with course numbering systems, with prerequisites and dependencies. It's got assignments with rubrics so educators can grade that really easily. Also helps students understand expectations of what they need to do for that assignment. It's got question banks, it's got recommended reading, textbooks and articles and so forth. A lot of really solid content that covers things like user science, design, development, front-end development, server-side development, and professional practice too. So it's a big thing, a big project that we worked on. I was involved for about 3 years, starting in 2007, and then at the end of December of 2010 is when I stepped down as lead. And Leslie Jensen Edmond and Christopher Schmidt took that over.
Yep.
So it's gone through some leadership changes over the years, but one thing I'm really proud of is we didn't just create this massive curriculum, which is open source and licensed under Creative Commons, but we also published a book with New Writers.
Yeah, that's right.
Called Interact with Web Standards, and it connects all of those concepts in the Interact curriculum, and then there's this textbook that's designed by educators and students. So it's literally designed to keep in mind the reading habits of students and how students want to skip certain content.
Yep.
So we designed it so you read and not skip certain sidebars and stuff. Generous margins so you can take notes. It's colorful. It's fun to read.
It's a beautiful book. It's really well designed. Great.
It really is, and that is to the credit of Leslie Jensen Edmond, who's was the creative lead on that, and a student of hers, Jesse, who did a lot of design and layout stuff too. So that was a really hard project, and it's a massive book. It's something like 500 pages, but it covers a lot of great stuff. And so if you're a student or an independent learner, it's a great book.
Yeah, I found the one thing that, because I've actually used this book before, that surprised me and I think was a really good thing is how much foundation stuff it has. The first chapter, it doesn't just start with, here's HTML and CSS. There's a lot of how the web works, how to get organized on the web. And I find that's something that's often missing in a lot of these books that aren't written by educators that have had to try to teach this stuff before and see that gap.
Yeah, there's a nice chapter there about learning on the web, of how to use things like Evernote or Google Docs or Gmail, all these different tools and strategies that, if you're a student, you often don't think about all these great tools that are out there to help you learn and retain this information and search, take notes. It's not just like, I'm sound like an old guy here, but in my day, it was a pencil and a notebook. And now you've got all these great tools to help you collect, categorize, search, recall, capture different ideas so easily with voice or images or whatever.
Yeah.
It's really wonderful, really wonderful.
So that kind of leads to a good question that I wanted to ask you. Over the time that you were there, you definitely saw this curriculum evolve. Where do you see web education now as opposed to where it was maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago? Do you think that this curriculum has had an impact? Do you think that web education has reached a different state than it was in middle of 2000s?
Well, I see a lot of different entities that are trying to crack this nut. And we've recently just licensed Interact to the W3C. So now Interact content is part of the W3C, which is really cool. And they're working really hard to do a lot of education outreach. They're working with Opera. My friend and longtime colleague, Chris Mills, who worked on Interact and worked on Opera's Web Standards curriculum, that content is now with W3C as well. So I'm really encouraged by that. And I'm also seeing a lot of for-profit upstart, like these startups that are tackling web education. So there's Treehouse. If you've seen Treehouse from Ryan Carson and his team, that's really cool too. And it's independent learning. It's a paid service where you can just subscribe and learn about like iOS development, HTML, CSS, design, user science, all kinds of stuff. And there's a lot of other startups that are doing this type of thing. They're doing intensive courses, workshops and stuff. And I think that's great because, we're sort of putting a lot on the shoulders of colleges to make changes quickly. And we all know that that's not the strong suit of colleges because there's a lot of bureaucracy and a lot of people to get trained and up to speed and so forth. And so colleges are really great at carrying a legacy and carrying foundation concepts. They're really good at that. But adapting and changing really fast, it's a lot harder. So these startups are doing this. I see that as a really nice supplement to a liberal arts education where you get a sound liberal arts education. I'm so happy that I got a liberal arts education and I learned about philosophy and design and religion and psychology and math and all that stuff. It all comes together. It's all connected.
Yeah.
And you're a better person for understanding how all that stuff connects. And then all of these other tools like Treehouse, and I'm blanking on some of the other names. There's some a really cool, like these little coding workshops based out of Chicago. It'll come to me later. Where you can go for like 6 days and just be in an immersive environment and learn about a particular topic. I think that's really great supplemental information. Go to a conference, learn independently. I just met a student the other day. This guy's been learning on his own from high school, and then now he's in college. He's like a sophomore in college. He's just in love with web design, and he's just doing it on his own.
Yeah.
And that's really cool. That people are doing that. I know that it's not feasible for everybody, but if you're hungry and you're curious, there's a lot out there for you.
No, I agree, and it's been so awesome to watch. Carsonify's Treehouse especially evolve from their Think Vitamin membership and evolve to that. And on this show every week, we highlight kind of the stuff that they're doing, and it's awesome. I love it. Do you see that as kind of being the direction for web education? Or on the other hand, what role should or can or do you think will a 4-year institution play over the coming years for web education? Like for the students who, want to have a degree in this, where do you see that going?
Well, I think that people like yourself that are leaders in education, that are following what's happening in the industry and bringing that to the classroom, I think that youth passion in the classroom, that is so invaluable, so important, and it's kind of hard to come by because there are industry jobs where people are going out and can make pretty decent cash, or you can go get involved in education, and it's hard to teach adjunct. You gotta hustle. You gotta run from this place to that place. It doesn't always pay great. You gotta figure out healthcare. I've done that stuff myself, and it's hard, and you just have to do it for the love of what you're doing. That's really great. But I think that there's a big role to be played by 4-year institutions, and it's starting to trickle in, and I think that that's going to happen more in the next 5 years. Especially, I think that when 4-year institutions see a lot of these startups and for-profit institutions maybe being a little competitive and stealing some students, that competition is a good thing, and I think that will force these 4-year institutions to maybe jump on that a little bit faster. But I think that there's a place. It's a big market, and there's a place for the 4-year institution. There's a place for the for-profit startups and for-profit institutions for this, because people are coming from they've already got a degree and they just want supplemental information to be better at their job, or they're just out of high school and they really want to get into this and they want a strong foundation. They're going to look for a 4-year institution that might give them the degree, the credibility or accreditation or whatever, so they can go out and start their career if they want.
Yeah, that's a great point about the competition with the not-for-profit. I've seen, definitely at the the community college level and some of the smaller colleges that can see that there's for-profit places doing it. I've actually been involved with some of these discussions of, hey, we need, how do we get to do that? And that's a great point, and it is trickling in. I think I kind of have one last question related to this web education and implementation of, the thing that you hear a lot is the web just moves so fast. Do you think the field is at a point now where we can have foundational courses where you could, study for 2 to 4 years and this material will still apply 4 years later when you graduate, 2 years after you're out in the field? Do you think the field's maturing or slowing down, or is it still going to have that rapid pace?
The field's just, it's still going to change, and that's a function of the youth of our medium, but it's also a function of the nature of our medium, that it's all about sharing information quickly. It's ephemeral. Web pages are not designed to last forever. Books are. They're great at that. And so our medium, where we're publishing content, everything changes all the time. There's a lot of churn, and that's great. But the foundational courses, that the stuff that I taught in 2005, markup is a bit different, and you might have a slightly different technique here or there, but the foundations are still solid. If I were to design a college today, I would put a web school right in the center as the hub, because if you're studying journalism, photography, law, medicine, anything, creative arts, you all need to understand the web, because it's this primary means of communication. So everyone can go take these foundation courses about HTML, CSS, a little bit of JavaScript maybe, understanding image editing, how to publish things to a server, that type of stuff, or even some like basic media stuff like Marshall McLuhan and understanding history of communication media would be helpful too.
Yeah.
All that stuff is relevant regardless of what it is you're studying. And I feel like a lot of people treat the web as some commodity instead of this foundation that is central to everyone's career. It doesn't matter what it is. Farmers need the web. I actually just did some usability testing a couple months ago in England, southern England, with a beekeeper who uses the web every day, all day. He's out in the fields with his bees, and they raise crops and all sorts of things. But he uses the web to keep in touch with all of his wholesalers, his suppliers. It's central to what he does in his business. So it's who we are today. And I don't know how we can deny that anymore. We have to make this central to our education process too.
Wow. Awesome, man. Do you have any stories that kind of stand out, or interesting little insights or things from your time working with the Web Standards Project?
The one thing that I think that blew me away by what we did was, there were probably about 10 to 15 of us that put in literally thousands of person hours for $0. And we didn't do it for money. We didn't do it for fame. We didn't get any of those things out of what we did. We did it for the love of what we do, that we feel like this is something that we could do to help people. And that's what the web is all about. It's about people like you doing this podcast to share with people and try to just make the web a better place and make the world a better place by doing that. I think that this is not necessarily about an education task force, but this past year watching the Arab Spring and see revolution that is fueled by the web and to see graffiti about Twitter and Facebook, about social networks, that just blows me away. That if I were Hillary Clinton, if I were Barack Obama right now, or a politician that's in charge, I would be at these businesses. I would be at Google. I know that they have gone and visited many times over, but I would be there because I think that the tools that we build on the web are the strongest enablers of revolution and democracy and human rights. They're stronger than dropping leaflets from the sky, or sending the CIA in to try to infiltrate and create these splinter cells of revolution. It's just letting people share information openly, creating this content and sharing that openly and not locking it down. What we did with SOPA to try to block what is potentially really harmful legislation that would have given great powers to some folks that could shut down different parts of the web at their discretion. That's really dangerous.
Yep.
And we saw this amazing rising up to prevent that. So I think that it's web education or just sharing content on the web. It's all part of something much bigger. That is why we were so excited to create Interact, why everyone is so excited to create whatever it is we're publishing on the web, and it keeps us tied to that, and keeps our heart in it, is that we know that we're in a special time right now. It's why I don't paint anymore and I don't cry, because there's something big here that we are involved in. And I think that's so exciting. If I were a high school kid right now, I would be so into the web. I would be all over this. I would be getting into it as much as I could, because it doesn't matter what your passion is. There's someone out there on the web that is like you. So it's great that nobody has to feel alone.
Yeah. Well, you speak the truth, man. It's some exciting times, and let's use that as a segue and kind of move into this last part of the show, which is learning on the web. And this is the part of the show where we go over the latest news from all of these video tutorial and learning sites that you can, on your own, not be involved in any formal education, and learn this stuff at a pretty deep level. And we'll just start with Team Treehouse. You've mentioned them. We love them. Big fans of Carsonified and all those folks. And they actually just came out with 4 new badges since the last show. They have one on accessibility, and a new website one. And so definitely check that out as well. And again, it's just so cool that as you learn all this stuff, you could build a profile that is not a college accreditation, but it would definitely be respected by a lot of web design agencies that see, oh, you've completed all these courses on Carsonified. So, go check out those new badges. They also brought in some new employees and some new infrastructure. It's been cool to watch how much money is going into investing. Video processing takes a lot of computer power, so they've definitely just increased all of that. Their other project that they came out recently, have you heard of CodeRacer.me, Aaron?
Yeah.
Did you see that? So I'm actually thinking of integrating that into the show a little bit. So, with upcoming guests, I might challenge them to a little code racing competition and do that as a little segue. Thought that might be a little bit fun. But again, great application. Go check it out, CodeRace.me. I just see so many applications in the classroom to be able to do this and have students play and test their skills with each other. In other news, Digging into WordPress, the book from Chris Coyer of CSS Tricks, is now out 3.3. And I've used this book several times in the classroom teaching WordPress. Great book. Again, it's just designed really well. So, pay the money to get it in print. I don't know if it still has the nice binding, but it was designed to lay flat on a table so you could look at it and type what's in it. So that is out at Digging into WP. Toots Plus has a new site. It's learnjquery.tootsplus.com, and what they did here was basically just took all of their dozens and probably close to 100 now jQuery tutorials, and if you sign up with your email, they have organized them and they'll email you one lesson per day for 30 days. So it's not necessarily new content, but it is reformatted. And if you're that person that's just like, I know I need to learn jQuery, just go sign up there, and hopefully their email's bothering you enough for 30 days will get you learning at some level. And finally, lynda.com has a few new videos out. One of them is on web workers, so for threading JavaScript. This is pretty advanced stuff, but if you know your JavaScript, having stuff queued up can be a difficult process, so this series goes into that in depth. They have a new CSS video series on page layouts, which is great because so many intro web courses, you learn all this great stuff, you learn CSS, and you get to the point where you kind of know how to do a 2-column layout, but you more know how to copy and paste a 2-column layout. So this is a great resource for someone who's learned CSS but doesn't really have control to think of a design or sketch a design and then be able to implement it in code. And their final one that came out, which I'm excited about, is Interaction Design Fundamentals. So it's cool to see these courses, and Aaron, you talked about teaching some that are similar, more of the higher level thinking, interaction design, user experience, accessibility. So it's cool to see that they have this Interaction Design Fundamentals course that's completely agnostic to the technology behind it, but it's talking about the fundamentals of it. Anything recent from you, Aaron, that you've come across on the web, good learning resources, good tutorials, anything of that sort?
Yeah, there are a couple. The one that I couldn't recall a moment ago, the folks in Chicago that do those workshops, it's codeacademy.org.
Okay.
So that's a startup, and they do these intensive workshops that you can go to, and it's pretty great stuff. There's actually, if you listen to This Week in Startups with Jason Calacanis, there's a nice interview with their CEO about their story and how they created this kind of mini school, like in no time flat. Really, it was amazing. Wow. They had a lot of people that signed up, and they're now offering a lot of classes there. Ruby on Rails and all kinds of different things. And then this is sort of a bad name collision. So that was codeacademy.org, and then there's codeacademy.com.
Wow! No matter where you go, you're going to find something.
Yeah, I'm sure there's probably some discussions between these two groups about the name collision there, but codeacademy.com is a pretty cool place for independent learning, to just learn how to get the basics of coding with JavaScript, but these concepts would apply to a lot of different things like Python or Ruby or whatever. How to create a variable, how to create functions, how to create arrays, and get all that stuff to work together. So those are both really good resources.
Is that second one, the second Code Academy, the one that kind of has the in the browser console and you type and it tells you? Yeah. I gotta say, man, I think that is such a great way to learn this web stuff in the browser. Responsive feedback as you go. Yeah. Love that one. Awesome, man. Thanks for those resources. Before we wrap up, then let's just thank again our sponsor, Wistia, amazing hosting service providers, great, incredible people behind it. They just came out with a new video on why making videos is so important. And as I've said before, Wistia is not necessarily in the price point that a student web designer would use for their projects. However, when you have a project or you're in an environment that needs professional video hosting and it's important to track what analytics is being done, and you need some JavaScript library to go along with it, you got to keep Wistia in the back of your mind. They're amazing people and have a great product, and we're grateful for them to be able to use their stuff on this show. So thanks again to our sponsor for that. And I'd like to thank again our guest for today, Aarron Walter, not just for coming on the show, but also for being an amazing inspiration on the web, man. I've got to say, I've seen you speak, I've read your work, I did some stuff during the Interact curriculum, just writing modules, and got to see some of your leadership and stuff there. So it's awesome to know you and to have you on the show. Got to thank you for that. And also, although we didn't talk about it too much today, I want to encourage everyone to go pick up your book, Designing with Emotion, and it's from the awesome publishers A Book Apart. So look that up. If you don't have it, go pick it up. You can get it in mobile version, you can get the print version, and like you said, it's designed to be read very quickly, and I definitely know it's going to influence your design. So whether you consider yourself a designer, a developer, you need to get your hands on this and take it for a read. I also want to encourage folks to go see Aarron speak at upcoming conferences. So you've got the Event Apart series that's going on and traveling around, but also this new conference, Future Insights Live, from the folks at Carsonified. And this thing is going to be at MGM Hotel Las Vegas at the end of April. And I think that's going to be a lot of fun. I love the conferences that those guys put on, and I'm sure you're going to have a good time. And it sounds like is maybe a new talk coming, some new stuff from you there.
Yeah, I'm working on a new talk for that one, which I still have a ways to go on. But yeah, it's going to be fun in Vegas. Wow, that'll be interesting.
Yeah. So thanks again for all the listeners, whether you've been following along for a while or just joining us for Season 3, talking with all of these web educators. We really appreciate you turning in. So thanks, and keep on learning.